Hi everyone! Welcome back to another Planetarium live stream. My name is Jessica. I am the director of the Planetarium, and with me I have one of my students, Eli, and I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Eli. I'm a physics and astronomy student at UMD.
So since it is July 1st, the beginning of the month, one of the things that we like to do is a show kind of talking about all of the upcoming events, astronomical events, things that you can find in the sky during the new month, and also touch on some of the kind of interesting current events that may have happened or are upcoming. So before we head into that, if you have any questions throughout, leave them in the comments. I will be watching those and we will answer them when we see them, or if we don't get to them right away, we will take time at the end to answer your questions. So I am actually going to turn it over to Eli, who is going to be doing our show for tonight.
Let me get my screen share really quick, see if I can do this successfully. It's not bringing up my the presentation, so I might have to. There we go. Give me just a second.
Yep, go for it. So I will just, while we're waiting for the Eli to get all ready to go, if you were watching before we got started, you would have seen some of our exciting news that is kind of scrolling through at the beginning. We are going to offer 2 virtual summer camps in July, and we have a link in our video description to take you to all of the information and registration and that sort of thing. So we're really excited. We've been working pretty hard the past few weeks to put this together, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think I got it working. Is that being shared now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So what's up, July? I'm just kind of talking about some of the things you can see this month, and also some cool things that we learned about astronomy in the last month as well. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Comet Neowise. So Comet Neowise on the night of July 3rd, which will be Friday, will be making its closest approach to the sun. So when a comet comes to the inner solar system from way far out in the solar system, from a place called the Kuiper Belt usually, it follows a really highly elliptical orbit. So there's really good times to see it and bad times to see it. And that ranges from comet to comet. It can be a year in between, or it can be 50 and more years in between. Neowise is getting to the place where we can see it the best right now, which is fortunate for us. So it actually won't be, you won't want to check it out the night of July 3rd. You're going to want to check it out the morning of July 4th for us. So it sets really early, right along with the sun on the evening of the 3rd, just because they're so close. So you'll actually want to see it right after it rises. So at about 3:30, 4 a.m. On the 4th of July. So it'll rise in the northeastern sky, just below the constellation Auriga. And then it'll be visible for about an hour, maybe a little longer, before the sun rises along with it, at which point it'll be drowned out by the sun. And it'll shine at a magnitude of 6.2, which is kind of just the lower limit of what the naked eye can see. But if you have binoculars or a telescope, you can see it extremely well. It'll be really cool to see, actually. And it'll be between 5 and 10 degrees above the horizon during that period of time when the sun is coming up behind it. So at 3:30 a.m., it'll be 5 degrees, and then it'll move. It'll be 5 degrees above the horizon, and then it'll move another 5 in the following hour. So if you really want to see it really well, I'd recommend making your way to like Hawks Ridge or Brighton Beach type place where there's not a lot of noise around you, or like light noise, and it won't be drowned out. And then I bet you could see it with your naked eye if you made it out there. So yeah, that is Comet Neowise. So the next thing I want to talk about is we have a penumbral lunar eclipse this Saturday. So we kind of missed out on the annular solar eclipse that happened, what was that, about 2 weeks ago? That was visible through a lot of Africa and the Middle East and parts of Asia. But we get a consolation prize of a penumbral eclipse. And so penumbral eclipse is when the moon passes through part of Earth's shadow called the penumbra. So Earth's shadow is kind of put into two sections. We have the umbra. So in here you can see it labeled. That is the quite obviously darker part of the shadow. And then we have the penumbra, which is kind of it's still shadowed, but not completely. So we obviously don't see a blood moon like we would see if it was an umbral eclipse, and we see that because when the moon passes through the entire or the umbral shadow of the Earth, which is the most intense shadow, light that gets bent around the Earth due to its gravity that gets redshifted can be seen on the surface, and since that's the only light hitting it, that's why we see it red. And that only happens for an umbral eclipse. This is a penumbral eclipse, like I said. So it'll just get darker. So this is an example of what you would see during a penumbral eclipse. This was taken in 2002 during a different one, but this is not unlike what you would see this Saturday. As you can see, part of the moon rather just gets darker than it was before the eclipse. And you can definitely see this. It's noticeable to the naked eye. It's not like you have to have a super high power telescope to see this. But I would recommend watching it as it progresses, so that you can like see the change as it goes. Maybe take 2 pictures or something like that. I don't know if like iPhone cameras would be able to get a very good picture of it, but maybe. Yeah, I would just watch the progression go. For Duluthians and people in Superior and the surrounding area, the eclipse begins just after 10 p.m. and it'll be at its maximum eclipse at 11:30 p.m. And then another hour and a half after, the eclipse will end at about 1 a.m. The next morning, I suppose it would be. So if you're up for staying up late, you could check out that eclipse. I probably will try to see it because I've actually never seen one before. So next, we'll talk about Jupiter and Saturn at opposition. So this is a diagram that I think is helpful for knowing what opposition is because there's a ton of different words that get thrown around and they kind of get messy when you don't, have them hammered into your brain like I sometimes don't, or when you don't see what's going on. So planet is at opposition when the Earth is directly in between the planet and the sun. So this can only happen for planets farther away from the sun than the Earth. And so because it's at this alignment, the Earth and the planet are the closest that they will ever get usually. It can vary a little bit, but rule of thumb, this is the closest they'll ever get. So because of this, the planet rises perfectly at sunset and goes through the entire night and sets right at sunrise. It's kind of a really cool coincidence. Well, it's not a coincidence really, but it's a cool thing to see. And because they're closer, the planet looks bigger than it usually is. And for planets, like Jupiter and Saturn, it's not an entirely noticeable difference, but it's there nonetheless, and they're going to be brighter than they usually would be. So for us, Jupiter reaches its opposition on July 14th, and it will be its brightest that night. And then just a few days later, Saturn will reach opposition, I believe 6 days later. And it will be at its brightest then. So they're also going to be super close in the night sky. So it's going to be really cool to see them both next to each other. Give me a second here. There we go. So Jupiter and Saturn will be super close to one another, as you can see here. And not that you could see it with your naked eye, but Pluto will also be in that locale. Just know that it's way back there, tucked away in the outer solar system. But they'll be super close to one another as they, traverse through the month. They'll move close to one another as well. So every night you look up, you'll see them right there, or not right there exactly, but next to one another. And they will be their collective brightest on the 17th and 18th. So directly in between both of their oppositions is when you're going to want to see it. That's when they'll both be the brightest in the sky together. And they'll be in the southern sky between the constellations of Sagittarius and Capricorn. And they will be pretty easily visible between 9 p.m. and 4 a.m. But midnight is going to be when they're highest up, away from any light pollution or anything like that. Uh, yeah, I have
And
a little bit
I
more
will
notes.
add real quick, Jupiter is incredibly bright.
Yeah, it's super. It
So,
looks. It's like a really bright star if
yeah,
you look
it will
over it.
be brighter than any of the stars around it.
Yeah, I think is
Um,
it the fourth brightest object in the night sky? Well, it went from that perspective. The
I
sun,
think
or
so.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because
Um,
the only other thing brighter than, other than like sun and moon, is Venus.
Venus. Yep.
So it's really, really bright. So it'll be very obvious if you're out at night looking south, southwest, or south,
Yeah.
and you see a really bright object, it's Jupiter.
Yeah.
Saturn is not quite as bright. It's about an average brightness, same as like an average star. But
Mhm.
since they are close together, if you find Jupiter, just, scooch over your head a little bit to the left and you'll find Saturn right next to it.
Yeah. Yep. And then also, not that everybody has this equipment, but in case anybody does, if you have a really, really beefy telescope, like probably at least 10 inches in diameter, um, there's probably a super slight chance that you could spot Pluto. I would say the only benefit to this configuration is that if you find Jupiter, which is super easy to find, you know that Pluto is just a little bit to the left and a little down. But that's as long as Jupiter's light doesn't drown Pluto out. So if you have the equipment to find that, you could try looking for that too. Binoculars wouldn't cut it for that situation though. So this diagram that you're looking up here or looking at here is for July 18th. And the planets are going to be about 35 degrees above the horizon in the southern sky. So that's how you can find those, and they'll stay together as the month progresses. Jupiter and Saturn will stay next to each other. Um, okay, so next we will talk about crescent Venus. So another really good thing to watch for is Venus moving through the night sky, which made its transition to morning star about a month ago. So currently Venus is at its what we call waxing crescent phase, which is the phase with the X on it, and is going to continue to move in the direction that the arrow is going. So it's going to get larger. That's what waxing means. So the crescent is going to get larger until it turns into I suppose you would call it a half Venus or a first quarter Venus. And then it will transition into full and then go to third quarter Venus and then all the way back to new. So the interesting thing is, even though the amount of the illuminated side of Venus that we're seeing increases, since Venus is moving further away from us in its orbit around the sun, the planet is actually going to shrink in angular size. So you're going to see more illuminated but less surface area as time goes on throughout the month. So you can be watching for that. And as the month goes on, it's going to be moving further away. So like I said, it'll get smaller. So in order to see the phases, you'll need to have telescopes, or I bet binoculars could cut it too.
But be
But if
very careful.
Oh yeah, you
Very
don't want to point
careful.
at the sun or anything like that. Unfortunate. Newton tried it once; it didn't go too hot for him. But yeah, if you don't have binoculars, it'll be pretty easy to track throughout the sky. Pretty early in the morning, as we'll see here. I would recommend the early risers trying to find this about 4 a.m. And for the most of the month, it'll be around this location, right below Taurus, about 10 degrees above the horizon. And it'll be there for about another hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes before the sun rises. Then when the sun rises, you can maybe see it for a little while, but it's going to get pretty hard. And then obviously when the sun's up, don't want to be looking with any equipment or anything and fry your eyes. So it will be almost directly due east, and as the month goes on, it's going to make its way east. Or no, rather, it's going to make its way south. So it's going to be moving to the left in this picture. Or no, yeah, to the right. So it'll go east and then further right towards south. And this is the eastern skies. You would see it on July 10th. So just over a week from now. And then as you can see over to the left, we have Mercury just below the horizon too. Unfortunately, Mercury won't rise for us right now, but I just think it's interesting to talk about that since Venus and Mercury are closer to the sun than we are, they're always kind of in the same location. Well, not always in the same location, but they're in the same area around the sun. So just a cool
I
little thing there.
I always love talking about the phases of Venus because I feel like it's
Yeah, it's
something a lot of people don't realize that
yeah.
Venus goes through phases. But what's
Hmm.
also really cool is so Galileo was the first to see that and to figure that out. And that was kind of the final definitive proof that we live in a universe where the sun is the center of our solar system and we orbit around the sun. There was still a lot of debate whether the sun was the center or the earth was the center. And this was that final nail in the coffin that it had to be sun centered because Venus would not go through phases if the earth was the center of our solar system. And so there's just so much there with it, and it's just a lot. It's just really cool. I love it.
Fortunately, the church didn't share our enthusiasm for that
Not right
because
away.
it didn't go too high for Galileo right away. Um, but okay, so oh, cool. There's going to be a not exactly conjunction because they'll be closer together later on, but in this, in the month, the moon and Venus are going to be pretty close in the nighttime sky. So exactly a week later from the last one, which let me check was July 10th. So on July 17th, the moon and Venus will be smushed right next to each other in the sky. And the interesting thing is that they're both going to be in their crescent phases. So I think that's kind of a cool coincidence. They're going to be in opposite crescents, though. So the moon is going to be in its waning crescent, so it's going to get smaller and then transition to new moon. I'd say probably 2 or 3 days, maybe not even after this image is taken, so on the 17th. But Venus is going to be in its waxing crescent, which is kind of interesting. So you can check for that on July 10th. Again, same location, just about 10 degrees above the horizon next to the constellation Taurus. And that's at 4 in the morning again, July 17th. And then also early in the morning of mid-July, Mars will be in the southeastern sky. So July 10th, again, lots of cool stuff to see on July 10th in the early morning if you're an early riser. Mars and the moon will be pretty close to one another, just below Pisces, about 35 degrees above the horizon. And Mars is going to continue to go eastward as the month goes on, and the moon is going to super quickly outrun it as it moves closer to Venus. Like we said, in a week from that day, it'll be right next to Venus, which is way east of Mars. And then it'll shrink below the horizon just a few days after that. So July 10th, check for the Mars and moon right next to each other. And then also, interestingly enough, if we kind of take a wide view, this picture is extremely loud because there's a lot of stars there and it's kind of hard to pick stuff out, but luckily the planets are labeled in yellow. So we can kind of see that this nighttime sky we have right here has a lot of the planets in it. So I mean, you can see this kind of diagonal line going up. We have Venus, Uranus, Moon, Mars, and Neptune right there, kind of all next to each other. So Neptune's going to be to the far right of Mars, and Uranus to the far left. And Uranus is almost impossible to see with the naked eye. I would say from Duluth, it's completely impossible. And Neptune being totally impossible anywhere on the surface of the Earth to see. If you have a 6-inch telescope, you could pick out those planets probably pretty easily. And this, I think, might be the coolest part about July is we have this kind of alignment of all the planets. Unfortunately, we are missing Mercury. It's directly below the horizon. But just go down diagonally from Venus to the left, and Mercury is below the horizon there. And we have this cool alignment right there. And then if you remember, Jupiter and Saturn, which are kind of on the other side, also have Pluto right behind them. So all the planets are up in July, which is cool. Not in the same part of the sky, but they're all up, which I think happens pretty infrequently. I didn't check that out. I think
It's not too
is it not?
infrequent.
Okay.
No, and I'll say it's also not a coincidence that they're all in a line.
Right.
Because the planets all orbit in pretty much the same plane
Mhm.
around our sun. And so they all do kind of lie along a line, which is the plane of our solar system, which makes it really easy to help you find them, though, because they do line up. If you could find like Jupiter, the really bright one, then you can use that trick to help you pick out where the other planets are.
Yeah. Cool. I didn't know that. I thought that was probably a more infrequent occurrence, but that's cool that that happens. I wonder. Okay, this is just kind of me asking a question to one of my professors. Does does the angle that they make relative to the ground, is it a 23-degree because of the Earth's tilt?
Ye- I believe so.
Cool. Okay. I'm probably gonna look that up after this, actually.
Yeah, I would look it
Uh,
up.
yeah. Okay, so now that we know what you can see throughout the month of July, on to some news. So you might have heard in the news a couple months ago, kind of everyone was talking about it, and there were a lot of conspiracy theories as to what was going on. Beetlejuice, the star, underwent a pretty uncanny dimming that we've never seen the likes of, kind of with any star before. And astronomers knew that Betelgeuse was kind of nearing the end of its life cycle. So when this happened, at first the reaction was, "Oh, well, this is the end for Betelgeuse. This is going away." And then that was debunked pretty quick because we didn't think it would act like that. So then the next hypothesis was that a huge dust cloud went in front of the star. So that's why we weren't seeing as much of it. But if a huge dust cloud went in front of it, we'd think that either kind of none of the light or all the light was coming through, depending on where the dust cloud was or what the situation was. But then also only certain types of light would scatter off that dust, particularly sub-millimeter light. So they pointed a sub-millimeter telescope at it, the James Clerk Maxwell telescope, which is in Hawaii, and they looked at the star and they saw the same dimming. So dust cloud got ruled out. And what they have determined now is that the star was covered in up to 60% of sunspots, 60% of its surface area, which is kind of incredible. We see sunspots on our sun, except they cover, I would say, probably less than a fraction of a percent of the sun at any time. So for a star to be covered 60% in sunspots is kind of insane. And they are definitely going to be diligent in trying to figure out why this is happening and what the implications are for the star. But as of right now, we don't know much about it. We just know that that's the most likely candidate or the most likely culprit for Betelgeuse's dimming. So in this picture, you can see the progression of its dimming. It doesn't look like a lot, but you can see kind of in this bottom right side of the star, gets a little dimmer. So, okay. And finally, we're going to talk about the Mars Perseverance rover. I think this picture is really cool. The planetary landing test bed at NASA. I'd actually never seen this before, but that's where they test rovers. NASA's upcoming Perseverance Mars rover, which was set to launch on July 22nd, has been delayed again to July 30th and possibly further. We don't know if it'll launch quite yet, due to a faulty liquid oxygen tube. And this marks the third delay since its initial scheduling. The other two due to its main crane was not moving correctly, so they wanted to fix that, understandably so. And then the other delay was due to faulty ground support equipment, and I didn't find much elaboration on what that means, but I think it had to do with the shocks on the legs. I'm not sure, but I think that's what that meant. So luckily for NASA and all of the agencies that have instruments aboard this rover, the launch window extends well into August. So you can't always launch something and it'll go exactly where you want to go whenever. In fact, you have to be pretty precise about when you do launch it, actually, or else you could be way off course, and you would not make it to where you're trying to go. But
Or it would just
fortunately for
take a lot of extra fuel.
right, no, yeah, and they would just make it, impossible, or not impossible, but
Inefficient.
not convenient, yeah, for the launch. So they figured out, luckily, the launch window extends well into August, so they could delay it 3 times more if they needed to. But hopefully they can get all the tweaks and adjustments done so that they don't have to do that. When Perseverance does reach Mars, I think it's going to be one of the coolest rovers, just because it has a couple of really neat things on it. It's going to search for signs of life in an ancient river delta nestled into a crater on the surface of Mars. So it's going to scan the ground intensely with multiple cameras. It's going to analyze and collect soil samples with a laser and a turret, which sounds insane, but
A turret?
yeah. I think they're just going to shoot rocks out, which is kind of insane and cool. But Probably the coolest attachment that this rover is going to have is it's going to have an attached helicopter drone that is going to serve as kind of a test dummy, seeing if flying and that type of transportation is feasible on Mars. The reason we don't know is because the reason helicopters work here on Earth is because when their blades spin, they push air out of the way, but the air on Mars is way less dense, so they don't know if if the air is dense enough to create enough lift for the helicopter. So this is kind of the test dummy, seeing if that'll work. Yeah, that is what Perseverance is carrying. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it back over to Jessica.
Awesome. A lot of cool stuff. I'm excited for Perseverance. I think this is going to be like, I've loved Curiosity. It's been doing some amazing stuff, and I think Perseverance is just the next step. The next awesome. Is it landing with the sky crane? I'm pretty sure it is.
I don't know.
I think it has the similar landing. So, the Curiosity rover had the most complicated of landings on Mars, because before that, all of the landers and rovers had been really, really small. And so they landed in really just a giant airbag, surrounded by balloons that would cushion its impact when it hit the surface, and then those deflated, and out came the little rover. But Curiosity was so big, it's about the size of an SUV, that it wouldn't survive that. And so what they ended up doing is landing it with this hovering sky crane that literally, it was a hovering platform that then lowered Curiosity down onto the surface of Mars, and then the platform detached and then landed somewhere else. And it was crazy and amazing and completely all automated, because Mars is so far away that it takes several minutes for signals to get back and forth. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure Perseverance is landing the same way.
It makes sense. It's about the same size.
It's just how it's the safest of landing, but it also complicates that landing a lot, because there's so many different pieces that have the potential to fail. So that's going to be an exciting watching that landing once it gets to Mars. All right, I haven't been seeing any comments or questions. If you do have any, now is a great time to ask them and put them down in the comments. And we will answer them while we wait and see about that. Just another quick shout out for our summer camps coming up in a couple weeks. Registration is now open and will be open through next Friday. And as I said in the description for the video, we have the link to the website with the information and registration and all of that. So we're super excited for these. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, and unfortunately, I almost don't even want to say it, that we didn't get any submissions for our Sparkly Dino giveaway. So we're going to rethink it and come up with something new that hopefully will be more fun, and we can raffle or get these things out, because we think they're really cute and it would be fun. And also, it's the same dino that's up in the space station. So yeah. All right. Let me checking, not seeing comments or questions. So I guess we'll wrap it up. So we are not going to have a show on Saturday. We are taking the evening off since it is July 4th. And then we'll be coming back next week with our regular schedule. So on Wednesday, Eli is going to grace us again with his awesomeness and give us a look at a show that he has been working on called Star Wars Fact or Fiction. If you've been to the Planetarium in the past, you may know that we used to have a Star Wars show that was just getting very outdated. So Eli has been working on that. So he's going to give a preview of what you can expect once we can open back up. And then next Saturday, we'll be doing our July edition of the Constellation Storytime. So I think that's about it. We will wrap it up there. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. As usual, if you would like to see any live streams that you've missed, they're up on our YouTube channel or on the video section of our Facebook page. So have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful and safe holiday weekend. And we will see you next week. So, bye everyone.